Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Jacob Wile, too.
And welcome to a brand new podcast on the channel examining and discussing the future of various blockbuster movie franchise and their respective installments. And of course, episode 1 is a pretty darn big one, Jacob. You know, just a little movie. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Ferdinand. So, Jacob, what do you think of Ferdinand?
Definitely a bold move to release on the same day as our real topic, The Last Jedi.
God. Okay, so, folks...
It's kind of funny to think about it. Episode 1 is episode 8. I still was like, either... But seriously, though, on the topic of Ferdinand, like, either that showed that Fox had a lot of faith in it or no faith in it at all.
Well, you know, honestly, there's been like Alvin and the Chipmunks movies that have released against Star Wars and done really well as counter-programming. It's a valid strategy.
Like I said, it's either shows they have no faith in it or a lot of faith in it.
Exactly.
But let's get into the real topic at hand.
Oh, man, Jacob. So this has been one of the biggest news weeks in Disney. I would say this has single-handedly been the biggest news week in Disney history since Disney bought Lucasfilm to begin with, and we're like, hey, guys, we're going to release episodes 7, 8, and 9 and side movies. Oh, my God. Star Wars forever. So you like Star Wars, Jacob?
I love Star Wars.
Oh, boy. So,
And now this week they bought Fox.
Yeah, and they bought Fox, which honestly is a podcast in its own right, which we don't really have time to get into right now. And Dragon and I are on a really intensive schedule to get all our seasonal shenanigans podcasts out of the way. So we'll talk about Fox. Maybe in the Disney debate, we'll have a Disney Fox question. Who knows? Ooh.
Well, it's still pending.
So with the Fox thing, also there's a new Star Wars movie, you know, it's like probably the most divisive Star Wars movie since The Phantom Menace, honestly. Like, oddly enough, as odd as that sounds. Like, Attack of the Clones, everyone was like, yeah, it sucked, you know? This one, it's like either you're on our side of the fence where it's like we think it's a bold new direction for the saga and we absolutely love it, or you're on a certain other side of the fence where you're like, this isn't what I was expecting. This is bull crap. And granted, I know film is subjective, so I'm not trying to put every opinion into a box, but I'm just saying this is a very divisive movie.
Yeah, I've noticed. I mean, check out the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's actually lower than the original prequels. Which
is crazy. I can see it, though, Jacob. Honestly, I can see it, because this is not a safe movie for Star Wars. Like, in a lot of respects, this movie, for me, takes even more risks than Empire Strikes Back did back in the day. And I don't know, Jacob, like Rian Johnson this is kind of like a dream come true movie for me, honestly, because Rian Johnson has always been one of my favorite directors since Breaking Bad. And so he was very high up on the list when Star Wars was first bought out for Disney to direct a Star Wars movie to begin with. My second choice only to Brad Bird. And so to have this movie turn out like, just what satisfies me about this movie so much, Jacob, is the fact that Rian Johnson is just able to like step into the Star Wars sandbox and deliver his vision of it and completely just fundamentally shift a series that honestly, after Rogue One is, like Rogue One kind of, Chris Stuckman made a really interesting video, one of my favorite Chris Stuckman videos, about how Rogue One it's a movie where it's got a lot of wow moments right at the end, but I really don't feel like the whole of it is very solid. You know, it's kind of like a chocolate bunny around Easter. I don't know. But this movie, Jacob, whether you love it or you hate it, you've got to admit this movie is filled with bold ideas and bold risks.
And what does it tell you that they gave Rian Johnson his own trilogy?
So here's what we're going to do with this podcast, and this is going to be kind of a framework for a new podcast, Jacob. You're being promoted.
Yay.
You get your own podcast. Dragon, you get a podcast. Jacob, you get a podcast. And that's about it. for the time being. We'll see. But so Jacob, I'm really excited about this new format for us, because this allows us to go into a relatively, like, folks, we'll warn you about spoilers. We're going to try and split this about half and half between non-spoilers and spoilers. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to give you our general opinions on the film. We're going to tell you, we're going to break down kind of like the consensus of sort of the very divisive nature of how people feel about this movie, and kind of have a whole discussion about that. And then we're going to kind of go into spoiler territory and talk about what this movie, like the implications of this movie, mean for episode 9 and beyond. And Jacob, we will round out this podcast, much like how we round out every podcast going forward under this banner, by asking the question, what is the future of? Okay, so Jacob, I feel like before we get into our feelings, we kind of have to have a Star Wars title crawl of our own, where previously on, like, Jacob, this is kind of a bold thing, this is a monumental moment for you. 1 year later, you're getting a side series after appearing on the channel for the first time. Or I'm sorry, it's 2 years later from Force Awakens.
Yeah, my first ever video on here was our spoiler cast for episode 7.
So, Jacob, one of the big things I remember, that this is honestly one of the most memorable things for me, is I was definitely on the side, and I still feel this way. For me, I think The Force Awakens, the first hour or so of The Force Awakens is brilliant, honestly. Like, I still love it. It's still very rewatchable. I feel like the movie, like, all the, once they get on board the Millennium Falcon, it goes kind of all over the place for me. The tone of it sort of peters off. I, like a lot of people, feel like the Starkiller base thing is very repetitious. And I know that a lot of people love Force Awakens. For me, I want to love that movie, Jacob. I really do. It's especially because I think the first hour or so is so captivating. But for me, The Last Jedi it pulls off what The Force Awakens was trying to do, where it gives me a Star Wars movie that feels really new, really fresh. And honestly, Jacob, this is one of the most edge of your seat movies I've experienced in the theater in quite a while. I don't know if it's just the fandom of seeing the Star Wars movie, but I think it's more in the direction that we'll get into, just how this film is paced out, just the tension of it all the way through. Like, this is the first Star Wars movie I can think of where you really feel like literally anyone in the cast could at any point get killed off. It's, without getting into any spoilers, of course, it's a very white knuckle ride from beginning to end. And even though it's 2.5 hours long, it just kind of flies by, for me at least.
The 2 hours did really fly by quickly. This is definitely the longest Star Wars movie ever made so far. I mean, it clocks in at 2 hours and 32 minutes, which is 10 minutes longer than Attack of the Clones.
Oh God, I would watch this movie like 20 times in a row before watching Attack of the Clones once.
As would I.
So Jacob, I'm assuming you were on the side of the fence where I know you loved Force Awakens as well, and we had a big argument about that. I specifically, Jacob, the moment was the whole Kylo Ren thing.
Yeah, I remember it's like you weren't really too big on him to begin with.
And you guys like jumped on me. I was like, you know what, guys, I gotta say, like, I don't really care for Kylo Ren. And you, Sandy, and Dragon were all like, what? But you know what, Jacob? In retrospect, you were right. I was wrong. After seeing this movie, Kylo Ren is a freaking fantastic villain. Honestly, I think Kylo Ren is the kind of villain that holds up more on a rewatch once you kind of like understand all the themes of him and, what the writing is trying to do with him. Like basically the point that him being a spoiled brat is kind of the point of his character, and that's sort of how you have to see it through. And so with that in mind, I think this movie is really fascinating. It's a really intense evolution of both the characters. Go ahead.
That much was established in Force Awakens. And the way I see it, like, I still like Force Awakens, I believe, but don't get me wrong. There's like the way I see it, like, they established these characters as blank slates that could, well, not necessarily blank slates, but you get the idea. Like, they established them in a way that could be carried to future installments, and that was their job to pick up the pieces. And
sure,
obviously that went to Rian Johnson for the sequel, and he definitely took an interesting direction with these established characters, and even the new ones. And that was including Kylo Ren, which pretty much did surprise a lot of people, especially in this movie. Is how far they take him in this.
Yeah, we'll get into a whole spoiler discussion, kind of breaking down sort of the implications of it's just like the big moments of this movie that really kind of divide a lot of people. But before we do that, Jacob, let's talk about the divisiveness in general, because honestly, I'm not surprised. I'm really not. I kind of had a feeling it would be like this from the get-go of Rian Johnson, because we're talking about a guy who he made an episode of Breaking Bad that was 42 minutes long, that was literally about two characters trying to kill a fly. And it was one of the most captivating episodes of the whole series. So we're talking about a director, like, this is not a conventional blockbuster director like J.J. Abrams. Jacob, I know we're on kind of like two opposing sides of the fence with Abrams. Like, I give Abrams credit. His movies are fast-paced. His movies are well-made. But I think with Rian Johnson, there's just this extra level there where he really wants to explore and wants to break down the universe and the implications of it. And so that's where I feel like a lot of the criticisms of The Last Jedi are coming from. The fact that this movie sort of fundamentally, without getting into spoilers right off the bat, it fundamentally kind of like it does things in this movie that sort of subvert a lot of your expectations, and also sort of kind of throw out fan speculation. You know what I mean? Like stuff that fans have been speculating on for a long time, just like whoop out the window.
Like one of the biggest examples of that, like, comes at the very beginning, and it doesn't even really spoil that much. It's like when Rey hands Lucas lightsaber, he just tosses it behind him.
I feel like that's a moment. Like, let's address this right now. The humor of this movie. Jacob, I'm going to use the two Marvel movies this year as an example. I'm not going to get into Homecoming because I have very divisive feelings about Homecoming, and I don't want to start a big fight about that right now. But I'll use the two cosmic Marvel movies this year, Thor Ragnarok and Guardians Volume 2. I feel like while Guardians Volume 2, a lot of people say the comedy in that movie is out of place, but for me, Guardians is a more goofy franchise to begin with, and a lot of the themes of Volume 2 in particular have to do with family, and they're specifically riffing on the sitcom formula. You know what I mean? The 80s sitcom, and that's what a lot of that movie is. And so for what Guardians Volume 2 is trying to be, I feel like it lands it very nicely. And unlike Ragnarok, I feel like Ragnarok's one of those movies where it has a lot of wow moments. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about Ragnarok in 5 years, just because those wow moments are kind of undercut by like, oh, gee, I'm cold. I'm going to make a funny comment about this and just undercut the drama because I'm cold. I don't know, Jacob. Like, that's the thing. Like, I feel like Star Wars The Last Jedi sort of, it's right in the middle between Thor Ragnarok and Guardians Volume 2, where I don't think it lands quite as well as Guardians Volume 2 does, although I know I'm in the minority of thinking Guardians Volume 2 might be the best of the MCU movies that were released this year. But I don't think it lands, I don't think it's nearly as distracting as the humor in Ragnarok.
There were some moments, at least I didn't like to undercut any kind of a drama. I mean, Thor never tried to have drama to begin with, and even when it did, it kind of failed to begin with either way. So
I understand that, but the thing about that is that with Guardians Volume 2, I feel like even though that movie is the funniest movie in the MCU, it also manages to be one of the most poignant, especially with the ending of that movie, like the whole last 10 minutes of it.
Well, I'm not denying any of that.
Sure, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, that to me is kind of like what makes Volume 2 a cut above Ragnarok. But Last Jedi, like I said, the humor kind of, I feel like Last Jedi is a better movie than any of the Marvel movies that were released this year, just kind of fundamentally, just on a filmmaking level, on a risk-taking level, not necessarily on a writing level. We'll get into that, but I feel like just the boldness of the filmmaking in this movie and the boldness of what Rian Johnson was trying to do kind of undercut some of the weaker writing elements.
I agree.
So, Jacob, I feel like one of the things, kind of like the big elephant in the room that any detractor of this movie is going to instantly point to is the Rose and Finn subplot, which I got to admit, like, I was warned about this. Like, I kind of, like, from non-spoiler reviews, folks like John Campea, Chris Stuckman, Jeremy Johns, they all kind of pointed out that Finn was a bit of a weak spot in the movie, and I got to admit, on my first watch, I didn't think it was that bad. There's one line in particular. There's one moment where, again, like kind of minor spoiler territory, folks, but nothing big or game-changing or fundamental here. But there's one moment where, first of all, I like the setting of the casino, Jacob. That's the thing. Like, I like the setting of the casino. I like the idea of the casino. The fact that it's basically kind of like a bunch of Iron Men in a way who are kind of just profiting off the Star War that we know so much about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of like a Star Wars casino and everything, like I do like that. And I think it's like, you know, just this whole like elitist rich planet, like kind of like a 1%er planet in the Star Wars universe.
It's kind of like this. It's like a step above the cantina.
Well, I wouldn't say it's I mean, like a step above in terms of...
It's what I meant to say was like a different take of like a cantina.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's certainly this movie's cantina, definitely.
It's like a high-end cantina scene.
So, Jacob, I will say the chase scene that takes place in this sequence is probably the weakest action scene in the film, just because I feel like the CG is a little out of whack, and I feel like other people have compared it to Harry Potter, and I kind of tend to agree.
It did feel kind of like, oh, suddenly there's a save the animals.
And then, honestly, Jacob, the line that kind of made me cringe, and it's like, yeah, there's no defending that, is just because it's so on the nose, is like Finn's whole, like, yeah, that felt great. You know, we made him hurt. I don't know, just like, I get the point, you know, I get what they're trying to do. It's kind of like, yeah, we brought down the 1%. It's just like, to me, it just, that moment, like, it felt a little false to me. You know what I mean? It felt just a little too political for a Star Wars movie. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I mean, I didn't really notice that line, but I'll have to watch it again. All right. Because I'm definitely going to see this again.
Well, yeah, I'm seeing this again on noon tomorrow, which is, honestly, folks, that is like the soonest I could get in to see a screening of this on one of my theaters, giant screens with the Atmos and everything. The first time I saw it was in a smaller theater.
I actually saw this on IMAX.
Oh, God, you lucky bastard.
I got tickets like the moment they went on sale.
I know. Well, I don't have an IMAX near me. I'd have to go to San Francisco to do the IMAX.
But yeah, it's like I said, I thought that I mean, I will admit the scene was actually pretty interesting to like. I'd give it props for its creativity, at least.
So, Jacob, any other?
It almost was like a helicopter police chase in a Star Wars movie, which I thought was like I said, I will agree with some people that probably does feel kind of out of place, but I think that's kind of going in kind of expecting something out of place, considering how people have been talking about this movie.
Right.
But I mean, like I said, I probably don't mind as much if other people do. What I can honestly do see where they're coming from is it's almost like a cops and robbers chase, which honestly, Star Wars really hasn't done before.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm gonna have to, like, I could see the potential of this on a rewatch kind of slowing down the movie for me and being like, oh boy, without the initial hype of seeing it for the first time, I'm like, okay, I really see the problem with this.
Yeah.
But
though admittedly, I can see it. I was like, considering it ultimately ended up being pointless.
Yeah, and
other than to introduce that child that appears at the end.
Okay, speaking of pointless, again, like this is like, I feel, Jacob, I am angry. I am like legitimately angry that Benicio del Toro's character was not Lando. Because I feel like that would have just served, like if Benicio del Toro's character was Lando, then it would have made that whole plot so much more relevant.
Maybe he'll come back in episode 9 for
Oh,
all
I
we
am sure he's going to come back in episode 9 because he's like one of the last links to the original trilogy we have left.
I was
So
talking about
yeah,
Benicio
they
del
have to bring him back for episode 9.
I was talking about Del Toro himself.
Del Toro, honestly, I think is probably the weak point of the movie. To me, he kind of reminds me of Mac from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Like he's like, hey, I can do it. I can do it. Like, hey, I betray you now.
But here's the thing, Jacob. To me, this is almost kind of like it's this weird mix between Empire with with this really dark tone mixed with a light sense of humor, which Empire had. I mean, that's the thing. When people talk about the sense of humor in this movie, I mean, don't think Empire didn't have funny moments. I mean, that's a tried and true defense of new Star Wars. But I think in this movie in particular, I feel like it's relevant to the discussion.
Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of the humor in this movie did land very well, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially like the scenes with BB-8, they really upped up his humor for this movie. I mean, especially when he was like fixing all those circuits, and then when he took control of that walker.
I gotta say, that to me was a little bit of a reach.
Yeah, I thought it was like an interesting. Like even the even the characters were confused by that.
Right. Well, okay. Here's the thing. That's kind of like a big thing that's going through the movie. I feel is the movie itself is almost kind of like deconstructing the Star Wars mythos in a really to me, in a really fascinating way, in a way that no Star Wars movie has done so before.
Indeed.
And I feel, I don't know, and that's, like I said, I kind of feel like I feel like we should transition to spoiler territory relatively soon. I want to make sure we hit all the points of the fan reactions to this.
Like, what other kind of reactions do they have? Like, I mean, like the race. Have we covered race parentage yet?
Well, no. Like I said, let's save that for kind of like the spoiler stuff.
I can't really think of anything else then.
Yeah, I feel like just kind of transitioning into the spoiler territory here. I feel like one of the main things that people are kind of griping about is this isn't my Star Wars. Like, this didn't go how I expected it to go. This isn't how Star Wars usually does things. And Jacob, to me, that sort of drives me crazy, especially because I am one of those people who was let down by The Force Awakens. I did think, like I said, I love the first hour of The Force Awakens. I think the first hour of The Force Awakens does some new things, but then once it gets down to it, it's just sort of like, oh, okay, it all kind of wraps up with like, we have to shoot the big space base, and then everything blows up, and ta-da. But with The Last Jedi, I was so satisfied with the fact that this movie is just a deconstructionist film, and it just drives me nuts. It drives me nuts that people, and like I said, Jacob, I'm not trying to tear down everyone who doesn't like this film, because I can see the divisive nature of it. Like, I can see going in, if you're not expecting what Rian Johnson does as a filmmaker, and if you're not equipped with that, it could throw you off. You know what I mean? It's kind of like going into, let's say like a Darren Aronofsky film for the first time. It's like, whoa, what is this? Or even something like Wes Anderson. Like, all directors have their own styles. And I love that Rian Johnson's style is in this movie, but that to me is because I am someone who's followed Rian Johnson since the early parts of his career. So his style to me is very familiar.
I can't say I'm as familiar with him. Honestly, I can't really say I'm as familiar with his work.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I haven't watched any of the episodes of Breaking Bad, and I've only seen like Looper here and there.
Yeah, I'm guessing you've seen Looper, yeah.
I mean, I think that's where I first actually heard of him.
Uh-huh.
Was like Looper was his first big film from the game big attention. I wouldn't be surprised if it was this. If it was that film and Breaking Bad that got him the job on The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a combination of the two.
because Looper's like a sci-fi film with that breaks expectations and has humor here and there and bursts of action scenes and able to do the heart-wrenching and dramatic action scenes and moments from Breaking Bad. So they say they lended himself directly to a film like Star Wars.
All right, so Jacob, let's transition into the spoiler territory here. So I imagine most people who want to see this movie, unless they like waited until the last minute to get tickets, actually have seen this. But just in case, folks, spoiler alert. So Jacob, where do you want to start in terms of, I guess this is going to be an interesting kind of pivot in our discussion because we're going to talk about both the fan reaction to these spoilers and also the implications going forward in the Star Wars saga. So where do you want to start here?
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot to dissect.
One of the big things I feel like we should start with, to me, which was a moment that really got me, was Snoke. Let's talk about Snoke.
Oh yeah, it's definitely surprising what they did with him. I mean, can I just say it outright?
Well, yeah, we're in spoiler territory here,
right.
So go ahead.
Right.
Snape kills Snoke!
So what? Snape? Snape.
I'm sorry, just riffing on the Snape kills Dumbledore meme. No, Kylo Ren kills Snoke. Holy crap.
Technically, Adam Driver cuts kind of look like a young Snape.
So here's the thing about this twist, Jacob. Here's the thing that I love about this twist, kind of the deconstructionist element that I'm just in love with. We all kind of saw it coming, right? Like, this isn't like something new in Star Wars. Like, the master always, the apprentice always cuts down the master. It's
like the Sith. The Sith. The Sith rule is, well, they're not claiming to be the Sith, but the Sith rule is like always two there shall be. One to embody power, one to crave it, and eventually usurp, basically.
But the thing about the way that Rian Johnson handles Snoke's death, let's face it, I feel like the thing that baffles me about this, Jacob, is people who are saying like, oh, Rian Johnson is just stomping all over J.J. Abrams' vision of Snoke. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, J.J. Abrams, the king of the magic box, like these big setups that don't really pay. I'm not trying to stomp all over J.J. Abrams, Jacob, but this guy, like, I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if Abrams, knowing what happens to Snoke in The Last Jedi and knowing how little screen time Snoke has in Force Awakens, I would honestly be shocked if Abrams didn't set it up from the get-go that this was ultimately going to happen, especially with making Kylo Ren such a three-dimensional character in The Force Awakens, which I feel like Kylo Ren and his whole character arc is one of those things you can point to with The Force Awakens, and you can definitely say, yeah, that's something they're doing different. That's something that's not just a repeat of A New Hope.
You see Abrams' credit. He was executive producer on this movie, so he probably had some say in what happened. So, or at least had something to do with what went on. And clearly, he wasn't opposed.
So I feel like, to me, it's just like the people who wanted Snoke to be like the all-encompassing, like, evil emperor of it all. Those are the same people. Like, are these the same people that were complaining about The Force Awakens being a New Hope ripoff? That's what baffles me. It's like,
I mean, definitely, I was kind of expecting him to kind of at least last until some part to episode 9 and like probably be killed off soon there, or at least when I was watching this scene, I was expecting like him to at least realize that, like during his anticipation of events, that it's like, holy crap, he's actually thinking about killing me, not the girl.
So here's what blew my mind about this scene and fundamentally shifts the Star Wars universe. Can't emphasize this enough, though. Spoiler alert. I feel like this one act, Jacob, this one moment is like, okay, you know what? Screw the light side and the dark side. We're going for a gray area here. And it's, Jacob, when this moment happened in the theater, I was just like, what the hell is going to happen now? Like not just in The Last Jedi, but just, like wrapping up the trilogy going forward. I'm just like, this changes everything in a good way, in a way that like it's impossible to just full on recycle the format of Return of the Jedi for episode 9 now. You have to do something new for episode 9 with this. Oh God, Jacob, I love it.
Is we're talking about the same moment here? The killing.
We're talking about the Snoke killing Kylo, and specifically for me, what it means, like the implications of the Star Wars universe going forward.
Like it proves that not even the person in charge of the whole event is immune to death. Pretty much that anything can happen.
And going forward, like I feel like Kylo Ren, because we've built him up to be this really complex character in The Last Jedi, even more so, like we get more sympathetic with him, but we get more layered with him. The whole Snoke thing, for, you know, again, spoilers, it's like a whole big setup. You know, like Snoke is like playing him like a puppet the whole time, the whole movie up until that moment happens. So we are pretty much on Kylo Ren's side as much as we are on Rey's side. And so that's why when the music kicks in and, you know, that wow moment in the theater of Kylo and Rey just crashing into all the Crayola guards, you know what I mean? It's, oh God, that's like, okay, this is something new. This is something we've never seen in a Star Wars movie. Like the light side and the dark side are gone now. Like I honestly at this point don't even know who the hell to root for. Like my mind was going a million miles an hour, Jacob. It was a game changer,
especially
in a good way.
Especially the early implication that it was like implied that Rey was going to fall to the dark side as well. It's like, what is the even
Luke either that or Kylo turning to the light side, which I feel like a lot of people just assumed like, oh yeah, Kylo Ren killing Snoke is going to be the thing that turns him to the light side. You know what I mean? But nope.
It only cements his dark side further. He basically goes insane with power.
Yeah. Oh God.
I mean, like he basically takes command of the entire First Order, even against Hux. I mean, even downright lies to General Hux about what happened. Like the girl killed him.
Hux, I feel like, is a perfect example of this movie doing humor right.
It's especially the earlier call with Poe. It's like General Hux. There's like, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
I mean, that just kind of goes in line with Poe's sensibilities. You know what I mean? Like that gag is pretty much this movie's like, all right, who starts? Do I start? Do you start? How does this work?
It's kind of funny that I can actually see Han Solo pulling that off too.
Right. No, I love the, like with Hux and Kylo, it's like this sibling rivalry.
Yeah, it's like funny. I mean, like I don't think they really ever interacted before too either.
I mean, they definitely like there were a couple moments where they exchanged back and forth. Like there was, I feel like in The Force Awakens, they were both kind of like vying for the same position, but they weren't really interacting with each other. You know what I mean? It was more of like an unspoken rivalry between the two of them.
I thought we were talking about Poe, and are we talking about Poe or Kylo here?
Oh no, I'm talking about Kylo and Hux.
Oh, Kylo and Hux. I'm not talking about Poe still. Sorry.
No, sorry.
But yeah, and like now you definitely do feel the sibling rivalry between them. Like it's like they're both competing for Daddy Snoke's affections.
God.
Sorry for that implication.
Jacob, I want to quickly just acknowledge what I consider to be one of the greatest moments in Star Wars history.
What is?
My girl Laura Dern, my girl from Jurassic Park, Dragon. I'm sorry,
not Dragon.
Jacob. My girl from Jurassic Park, Laura Dern, pulls off one of the most incredible freaking Star Wars moments in the history of Star Wars moments. With
the light speed decimation of the First Order fleet.
Yes. Oh my God.
I mean, that part made me go, holy shit.
Especially with the visuals, with the way that Rian Johnson directs that whole thing. It's like the slow-mo kind of like, oh God, it's like it's one of those things where you really have to see it pulled off in theaters to, you know, really get an idea of what it looks like. But
especially like the blinding light and then the sudden boom into like silence and like the deafening silence and the deafening loudness.
And I don't know. I've heard complaints about Laura Dern's character. Honestly, to me, I feel like I have a bias because Laura Dern is one of those actresses. Just because I have such an attachment to Jurassic Park, like every time she pops up and everything, I'm just like, "Yay, Laura Dern!" You know what I mean? Like it's hard to look at her characters with a critical eye for me.
Though admittedly, she could have at least said like, "Yeah, we're trying to hold off and get onto the fleet, hold off into the escape pods before we, just so we can get away out of their reach." And basically, she didn't not telling anyone. She kind of brought that on herself, the whole mutiny on herself.
I feel like it's one of those things where on a rewatch, I'm going to have to determine whether or not it bothers me. Because when I was watching the movie, I thought it was fine. I thought it was a really interesting direction to go in with Poe's character. And honestly, I think the idea of a mutiny within the Rebel Alliance is something that we haven't really explored. It's one of those things like I feel like
don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I like the direction they took with Poe's character, like especially like Leia said. Basically, Leia can basically demote him because he basically cut so many people their lives.
That's a really good way to start the movie off.
Yeah, it's like seriously, it's like yeah. Sometimes it's like that's the thing, and he eventually learns this near the end. It's like sometimes the hero's thing to do is to run away.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, Drake. I'm sorry. I gotta say, Jacob. I'm with that theme in mind. I'm not too crazy about how that theme plays out with Finn and Rose.
Honestly, didn't really mind it. I mean, there were some. Honestly, didn't really mind.
I guess like with this movie, here's the thing with this movie, since with at this point the movie's already taken so many risks. You know what I mean? Like they kill off Snoke, and they do like really bold things with Luke Skywalker. They do really bold things with the Force, and so that moment where Poe is just, or I'm sorry, where Finn is just barreling towards that laser cannon thing. I'm just like, oh my God, they're going to do it. They're going to freaking do it. They're going to kill off John Boyega. Holy crap. And so, Jacob, I guess the power in that moment, it'll probably have to play better on a rewatch for me, but the power in that moment is probably going to be the fact that the movie was ballsy enough up until that point to get me to legitimately believe that, like, you know, one of the main faces of this new franchise was going to bite it right then and there.
I mean, that's what I was anticipating. Though I guess they didn't kind of want somewhat of a repeat of the last movie, though. I mean, he kind of suffered those life debilitating injuries in the last movie too.
Yeah.
So now someone else gets to suffer in his place.
Okay. Shall we talk about Leia?
Sure.
So Carrie Fisher just, oh God, Jacob. As soon as I saw her on screen and I heard the Han Solo love theme, it took me a minute. It like that hit me. That hit me, man.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like Ryan Johnson even did say, like those scenes like have a different meaning now that Carrie Fisher is actually gone.
With that in mind, I feel like Carrie Fisher's performance throughout the whole movie is freaking beautiful. It's probably the best work she's ever done throughout any of the movies she's been involved in.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's like sure it was her last movie, but what a movie to go out on.
So let's talk about the moment, Jacob. Honestly, when I saw this in theaters, I loved it, but I can see how people could think it's silly. Here's the thing. I thought the implications of this moment, you know, the fact that it's like, okay, we're finally after all this time seeing Leia use the Force in like a really impressive way. And to be honest with you, Jacob, I think the fact that it was sort of involuntary, you know what I mean? The fact that she kind of like does it without even being conscious, like I feel like that fits really well within her character, where she is a Skywalker. She's very Force sensitive, but you know, she's never really honed in on it. So to me, everything fits, except I can see how the visual was a little silly. I can see that.
I mean, that does glad finally showed her actually being able to use the Force outside of like somehow communicating with Luke and things like that.
Yeah.
Be like beyond like sensing Luke or doing things like that, or like sensing Han's death or something like that. I mean, finally shows like, hey, she's able to use the Force.
And of course, you can't look at that scene without thinking of, I mean, it's just like, it's really crazy how that scene reflects real life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like I was like, oh, I thought she was actually gonna die pretty early, but then I remembered, oh wait, she's on that crystal planet later, so she can't die here.
Yeah, you see, that's why I don't like watching trailers anymore. I'm kind of done with trailers after this movie, to tell you the truth.
Well, well, there's always the clever trickery. Like, there's some clever trickery involved in the editing in this movie, so you can always. So who knows?
So, can we address the first casualty in this movie?
Sure.
Okay, we lose Akbar, man.
Oh,
We lose. It's such a bummer because I was looking for him and he's like, oh, there he is. There he is. He's still kicking.
and he's dead.
Jacob, this reminded me. This is actually a Harry Potter moment I'm going to compare to. That's actually in a positive light, unlike the Finn and Rose stuff. It reminded me a lot of the first death in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Dobby.
No, not Dobby.
Oh wait, Dobby was like near the end of the first movie.
Yeah, like like don't say who it is, but the person who dies in the first action sequence in that book.
Oh right. Oh god.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Where it's like it's a character who is technically pretty expendable to the story. He's kind of just like a quirky curmudgeon of a character, but at the same time, his death is just so matter of fact. It's like, yeah, we lost him.
I was actually thinking of something else, but now that you mention it, yeah.
Oh, I know what else you're thinking of. Yeah.
Oh god.
This movie, in a lot of ways, has some weird comparisons between Deathly Hallows in terms of how it handles the deaths.
It's like, yeah, we built up these characters you know and love, and suddenly they're dead.
Right. I think it does it in a better and more dignified way than Deathly Hallows did, but that's a whole other conversation.
Like, you love these characters, now let's toy with your emotions by killing them.
Seriously, like J.K. Rowling, like just suddenly got the George R.R. Martin bug at the end of her saga.
It's like I could like go like Mr. Burns like putting his fingers together, going, "Now I'm gonna kill this character."
Oh God. Okay. So back to the Last Jedi.
Akbar, yeah, that was sad.
But I like it because it's like, what the hell else can they do with that character? You know what I mean? It's like, I like that he stuck around this long, and I like that his death actually meant something for the story.
Yeah, me too. And especially, this reminded me of like when during that like cast video where he's like, "That's a wrap."
Yeah. Oh God. Oh, and it's sad because that actor died too, Jacob. I'm just realizing this.
He didn't get a dedication though.
I know. Oh, that's sad. Okay. So, Jacob, let's talk about something that we probably are bearing the lead on. Let's talk about Hamill, which, honestly, this is one of the elements of the movie where I'm sort of shocked that people are as divided on it as they are, because to me, I love it. It's like everything about all the Skellig Michael Island stuff in this movie is like, it's genuine Star Wars, but it's in a location that we haven't seen before. It's in just the cinematography in this location alone is just stunning.
Yeah, like, oh, but like before we get to Luke, can I just mention something that I really like to mention?
Yeah.
Yoda.
Well, yeah, I was gonna kind of build to Yoda, but
sorry.
No, it's fine.
Like he's only in one small part, but it was just so good to see Frank Oz.
Yoda was so in character.
Yeah, like the crazy old man.
I feel like that's a moment that could have so easily been fan service. It could have so easily been just like, oh, really, we're doing this. But instead, oh God, you know what I love about it, Jacob, is that it perfectly sets up what happens with Luke, but it does so in a way that leaves the audience guessing.
It's like, I'm sorry, I should have built up to him myself. I mean, I wanted to build up to him, but I kind of buried.
No, I know, I understand. It's just, well, let's get to it. So,
I mean, what I wanted to lead up was like one of the other fan things, like his astral projection of Luke's astral projection isn't okay, but Force ghosts are.
Okay, here's the thing. When I first saw the astral projection in the theater, I was a little mixed on it. And honestly, I feel like thinking about it more and more, I'm more okay with it.
I mean, I thought, I mean, let me tell you something. Let me just tell you something. I saw like that night. It's like when it was astral projection and like he was like he was like, shown that he was gone and Kylo was in like enraged. Like the entire audience cheered.
Oh yeah, me too. Me too.
It's like, yeah, that's Luke. That's the like, yeah, that's what we're talking about.
So it's one of the here's the thing, Jacob, the things that they do with the Force, including the kind of like I've heard it be called like Force Skype between Kylo and Rey. It's very different. It's very unlike what we've seen with Star Wars before. But I feel like a broken record here at this point, but that's what Rian Johnson was going for. Like, we want to see new things with Star Wars. We want to see Star Wars explored in a way that's not just like dark side, light side, Skywalker.
Yeah, and it's like it's very openly like the disproving of Rey's parents, that how she's not tied to anyone, the whole light side, dark side being gone. It's like definitely bold direction.
I have no idea how anyone can complain about the Rey parents thing, to tell you the truth. That's one of those things where it's like,
one of my theories like I talked to somebody about this, and even I was like, it's entirely possible that she's related to nobody.
right.
And I was entirely correct on that.
I mean, this is one of those things that goes back to like, are these the same people that were complaining about The Force Awakens being a New Hope ripoff? Like, really? Like, this movie totally would have been a ripoff of Empire if it would have gone the conventional, like, like Rey, I am your father, especially because Luke does go in a very dark direction in this movie. So it would have kind of been in place even more, like the stepping stones are kind of set up for that to happen.
I mean, I like the more idea of her having father figure, like parental figures rather than actual parents.
Anyway. Which it seems like that's the way that they're going with Rey throughout the saga, and perhaps Lando is going to be the next in line to inherit that role. hey, Rey, yeah. I'm your cool dad.
I'm your only black dad. I'm the only black dad in the universe. but seriously, it's like even Kylo points out, it's like you look for parental figures.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. It's like, okay, her actual parents just sold her off for booze money. It's like she realizes this, so she looks basically parental issues are an interesting aspect of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and this is a new way of dealing with parental issues, but not having it just be like, okay, literally, like everyone important to the story of Star Wars is either a Skywalker or a Solo.
No, well, yeah, it's like, yeah, Rey is not, but Luke, I definitely like Luke's direction in this. Like, Luke, even Mark Hamill himself admittedly was surprised by it, but he grew to love it.
To tell you the truth, it's honestly like the thing in the new Star Wars movies that feels the most expanded universe to me.
Is Luke's character?
Yeah, just the whole idea of him training Ben Solo and Ben Solo turning to the dark side and Luke. Honestly, the idea of Luke wanting to kill Ben Solo is something that
I wanted to build to that. I was like, that's something I wanted to build to. Like that's one thing that literally almost made me say out loud, "What the fuck?"
But to tell you the truth, I feel like just knowing what I know about where Luke's character goes in the expanded universe stuff, I honestly feel like that's not something that's completely out of line if Luke senses. Because the thing about Luke Skywalker post Return of the Jedi is he's not just some stoic, like, goody good two shoes like he was like the farm boy kid at the end of A New Hope. You know what I mean? Like, Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi is someone who has been, he lost his father in this very traumatic way. He's been through hell. It's like he's someone like he will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that this Empire shit doesn't happen again. And I feel like if that, especially with what we know about Kylo Ren and just how powerful he is.
Like I said, that part didn't. I mean, like I said, apparently I'm not as familiar with the expanded universe as you are. So, but
Well, there's multiple stories where Luke. There's stories where Palpatine returns and manipulates Luke to the dark side. Honestly, Anakin Solo is probably the main inspiration for Kylo Ren. Because in the expanded universe, there is like honestly, I think Kylo Ren is a much better name than Anakin Solo. It's like, gee, you name your kid Anakin, and he turns to the dark side. What a twist!
But yeah, I guess I'm not as familiar with that kind of stuff as you are, but I honestly do thought it was an interesting direction to take Luke. Like he's like they even bring that up, and there's like because I was a legend because I was Luke Skywalker.
And I like how I like the idea, and this kind of speaks to the direction of the movie in general. Is it's not like Luke Skywalker isn't some, like you said, he's not some big legendary figure. And this whole moment with Kylo Ren that sort of shifts the whole direction of the entire galaxy in a way. It has like these huge ramifications, these huge butterfly effects almost. It's like a single moment of weakness that's quickly overcome, but it's too late. And that's so true to life. Jacob, I feel like that moment right there is like the most Breaking Bad that this movie gets, because Breaking Bad, of course, is all about the consequences of your choices. I mean, I know you haven't seen Breaking Bad, but you probably know enough about it to know that much. Breaking Bad is all about like, okay, you're doing these things, you're making these choices, and like even the smallest things could come back and have the most horrifying implications. And so I feel like that direction, I feel like that is a Rian Johnson thing. You know what I mean? Whereas the Snoke thing, I feel like was more something that was set up specifically by Abrams. Because I feel like the Snoke thing is just more in Abrams' wheelhouse to set something up that looks like it's going to be a big payoff and then have it not be a big payoff.
I guess I thought of more as like, I understand what you mean there.
But with Luke, it's more like, I feel like Luke is the most Rian Johnson thing in this movie. And like you said, I feel like the fact that Hamill at first was rather disquieted by the direction that Luke goes, I feel like that kind of speaks to that, the boldness of Luke's character arc.
Definitely. I mean, like I said, that made me go like, "What the hell?" out loud, basically. Well, not out loud because I was in a theater and I'm respectful like that, but but I mean that made me go like, "What the hell?" Like I was like, I mean, like, sure, Luke cleared it up later, but it's like I like how it actually showed like both perspectives. Like for Ben Solo, for Kylo, it was like my master's trying to kill me. It was like, and for Luke, it was like I was weak that one moment and basically cost everything.
Yeah, really powerful stuff there for me. Like I said, very Breaking Bad-esque.
Like I said, I like how it showed the parallels of that, like both sides, both points of view.
And also, it's the first flashback in a Star Wars movie, and I think it fits in quite well. And it's very appropriate that the first flashback in a Star Wars movie is something that.
Wait, but what about the one in Force Awakens? Unless that counts more as like a Force vision.
I feel like that is technically a flashback, but it's like I feel like the Force vision was kind of like a trick. You know what I mean? Like a gimme. Like, okay, it's a flashback, but it's not technically a flashback. And I feel like Rian Johnson's like, oh, JJ, let me show you how it's done. Let me show you. I'm just going to do a flashback, and it don't matter because you can do a flashback if it's implemented in a good way.
All right, then.
All right. Let me see. So, yeah, on the astral projections with Luke, one of the things that I really loved is the fact that this movie specifically sets up like, hey, look, Luke's X-Wing is just at the bottom of the ocean. I wonder what's going to happen with that. And you're just like, and the fact that the movie doesn't do that, the fact that the movie subverts that expectation, it's
like I kind of saw it coming, and there are like hints of it, like the fact that his appearance is different.
As soon as Yoda showed up, I was like, oh, we're seeing that X-Wing go up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, and it turns out, nope.
So
I guess as far as the astral projection is, I kind of figured something was up. He considering like they basically shot everywhere, and they.
As soon as that happened, I was like, what is going on here?
I was like, okay, Luke's powerful, but he's not that powerful.
Exactly, exactly.
I know he can deflect laser beams with his like laser blaster shots with his lightsaber, but he can't deflect like freaking 10 AT-ATs or whatever those new ones are. He can't deflect like 10 of those at once. But then it was like that's the brilliant thing. He didn't have to.
Jacob, kind of like a humorous plot hole that I've heard in this moment that kind of makes me chuckle is the whole idea, like, the very sentimental and poignant thing with the, like the dice from the Millennium Falcon that he gives to Leia. Like, it just makes me chuckle thinking, like, throughout the whole encounter with Kylo Ren, he's like, all right, keep the dice in, like, keep the dice here, keep the dice here. He's got, like, he has to, like, have the dice in the back of his mind the whole time.
That is kind of funny, though.
Like, in a way, that dice could have killed him.
Very well could have.
So, let's talk about the death of Luke Skywalker, spoiler alert.
It's like it definitely came out of left field. It's like, wow, they actually killed Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's actually dead.
That being said, Jacob, I feel like the moment is... It almost kind of brings a tear to my eye how perfect it is.
Don't get me wrong, it's a powerful moment. Especially like Ray said, like he's like it wasn't of conflict, it was of peace and purpose.
And just the reflection of the dual suns and just all the it's almost kind of like a.
It's like he's looking at like that's how his story began, looking out at two suns, and that's how his story ends, looking at two suns.
Jacob, honestly, like, if there's one thing I kind of wish we would have seen more of from Luke is, like, I kind of wish we would have seen a proper lightsaber battle with Luke. But that's Rian Johnson's thing, man. You know what I mean? That like, I gotta give him credit for it. It's like he, like, this is the first Star Wars movie where really there isn't a proper one-on-one lightsaber battle.
Kind of, it is really kind of true in a way.
Well, except for they spar a couple times, but even when they do spar, like Luke's not even technically there.
Well, not counting Rogue One, of course.
Well, yeah, of course, not counting Rogue One, yeah.
Yeah, but there's the thing. Like, it's actually kind of like brilliant how like he's dodging Kylo Ren's attacks. Like he's like dodging it by moving it around. Like if you notice, he never actually touches lightsabers with Kylo at all. Mm-hmm. It's like now that you think about it, it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting move on his part.
I mean, I think this is going to be one of those moments that plays really well on a rewatch because there's a lot of clues. There's no footprints in the salt.
Like I said, the fact that he's able to survive all those blasts.
Well, yeah.
And the fact that Kylo never actually touches him before, though, he strikes him in half, tries to strike him in half.
To tell you the truth, Jacob, when the moment first happened, I honestly thought the twist was that Luke was a Force ghost the whole time. Like, in the back of my mind for a split second before they cut back to the island, like, I was like, holy shit, Rian Johnson, you sly devil, you pulled a Bruce Willis. Could you imagine if that was the case?
And like Ray killed him or something too?
No, I'm not saying Ray killed him. I'm just saying, like, literally throughout the whole movie, like, Luke is just a very physical Force ghost.
Like, I see dead people. I see Force people.
That would be so nuts.
I see Force people. I can totally see that being a thing. I see Force people.
And of course, I'm sure that they're gonna bring Luke back in Episode 9 for a Force vision. I mean, that's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Actually, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Luke shows up for Rey and then Anakin shows up for Kylo, because there's been a lot of talk about Hayden Christensen showing back up for, to reprise Darth Vader.
I don't have no idea about that. I mean, I'll be able to get genuine emotion out of him this time, though.
I feel like they can do it. Because I feel like, much like a lot of the actors in the prequels, like, I've seen Hayden Christensen do I mean, he's not the best actor in the world, but he's been in a couple legitimate movies. Like, especially like, here's the thing with Hayden Christensen. I feel like Hayden Christensen is a little bit of a comeback story with the Star Wars fandom because he made an appearance at the Star Wars Celebration this year, where the crowd just really embraced him. You know what I mean? I feel like that's like he acknowledges that his performance wasn't the best and he wants to do right by it. And for that reason, I kind of want to see him reprise Vader.
That would be kind of interesting.
I mean, what they could do is they could do, I've been saying, I think a good Star Wars spinoff would be The Force Unleashed. Basically the idea of Vader having an apprentice. That'd be a good way to do a Vader movie.
That would be pretty cool. I don't know how they'd make that work if they like revealed that like this is non-canon or something.
Well, no, I mean, like like I said with the stuff, the direction that they go with Luke and Kylo Ren, like I feel like it very much is like there's no way that they didn't draw some inspiration from that, from the expanded universe, from the Anakin Solo storyline, Jacob, because
I'm not doubting any of that.
Because trust me, like the same beats of that general story happen, like the like Luke having a Jedi temple and then the Jedi temple being destroyed and all that. So I feel like much in that same way, you could apply that to something like The Force Unleashed, where The Force Unleashed isn't canon, but you could take the kind of like the general storyline of The Force Unleashed, sort of like what Marvel does, you know what I mean? Where, Civil War or Ragnarok, they're nothing like their comic book counterparts, but they're damn good movies.
Yep, I agree with that.
All right. So, Jacob, I feel like one last thing to talk about, one last thing to get into. The way that we would like to wrap up every podcast like this, we have to ask the question.
I just had a question, actually.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's like a speculation. It's like, do you think Kylo could take on an apprentice of his own?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that might be a direction we can see. But I feel like that kind of...
honestly, I don't think so, because it could convolute the story of Episode 9.
I tend to agree with that. Yeah.
I'm just saying it's entirely possible, or like at least somebody will. I'm just saying it's entirely possible. I'm not saying I want it to happen or it will. I'm just saying it's a direction they could possibly go.
I mean, I definitely think that's what he's wanting, right? Like that's what he wanted from Rey.
Yeah, it's like he definitely wanted her to turn to the dark side. Well, not necessarily turn to the dark side, but.
Well, that's the thing. That's a fascinating thing about Kylo Ren, is that he specifically wants to abolish the dark side. Like, this is the first Star Wars villain we've seen that, he is anti-dark side. And I love that about the direction that they're going with it. And it's just like the ramifications for the rest of the Star Wars universe are pretty big, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so going forward, Jacob, let's ask the question and then wrap things up. What is the future of Star Wars: The Last Jedi? So, Jacob, basically, two things. Sort of like I like to approach this as kind of like a hypothetical, how will this movie be looked at 10, 15 years down the line? I honestly think 10, 15 years down the line, if they keep making Star Wars movies, and with Rian Johnson and everything, if they keep making them as good as this, I definitely feel like the divisiveness of this film is going to give way. I feel like the divisiveness of The Force Awakens is going to be there more prominently in 10 years than the divisiveness of The Last Jedi is.
And all the people have pointed out, like, Empire Strikes Back was initially like regarded as like the black sheep of the franchise when it first came out, and now it's considered to be one of the greatest films ever made.
And Jacob, I gotta say, I know it's freaking hyperbole, but watching it in the theater, I think for me, this was my Empire experience with Star Wars. This was my experience where I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I genuinely didn't know who was going to live, who was going to die. The film was so gripping that it convinced me that one of the three main characters of the new trilogy was about to bite it. You know, it kind of pulled a Toy Story 3 basically within. So, Jacob, I'm not ready to say this movie's better than Empire, but this movie is definitely, for me, I mean, it's a different tone from the originals, right? Like, nothing is ever going to touch the originals when it comes to just the pure nostalgia factor and the practical effects and all that, you know what I mean? But, I mean, just in terms of, like, the visionary nature of The Last Jedi, this is almost kind of the movie. I feel like this is a good phrasing for me. Like, The Last Jedi might be the movie that I respect the most out of the Star Wars canon, if that makes any sense. Like, because just for me, being a fan of auteur filmmaking, being a fan of risk-taking, being a fan of directors just getting their their fingerprints all over something, this to me is like the most visionary Star Wars movie we've ever had. And while it might not be the most refined or the most perfect Star Wars movie, like, let's face it, Empire Strikes Back is a tough act to follow in any respect. It's kind of got that Jurassic Park franchise thing going on, right? Where nothing's ever going to be as good as the original Jurassic Park. But man, I mean, for me, I definitely think once we've gotten more used to the fundamental shifts in the franchise that this movie took, and honestly, I think for the future and longevity of the franchise, the risks and shifts in this movie are necessary. I really think so. Like, I think the risks that this movie takes and just all the bold new directions and world building elements that this movie establishes, like, I feel like this is the lifeblood that we needed after The Force Awakens was kind of like a repeat of A New Hope, and then, Rogue One was literally like another New Hope thing. You know what I mean? Like, hey, another movie about the Death Star. This was the new lifeblood of Star Wars that I feel like this is almost kind of like what Force Awakens should have been. Like, I understand why Force Awakens was the way it was, and like I said, there's definitely elements of the Force Awakens that I do love, but for me, this is just it's such an incredible movie for me.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Even Abrams himself admitted that whole thing. Like, basically, they needed to play it safe with Episode 7 to like reestablish the franchise as a major player. Even he's admitted to that. I mean, like he doesn't deny any of that. That's one thing I can respect about that. He's willing to admit those faults.
Sure.
But even he admits like now that it's all been established, we can actually go. He's actually admitted that he's actually going to try something different with Episode 9. So.
And I believe that. I think JJ wants to kind of go in some new directions with that.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Rian Johnson helped him see that, or if like he realized it himself. I mean, but I wouldn't be surprised. Honestly. I mean, and I can't wait to see what Rian Johnson has in store for his own personal trilogy.
I gotta say, I hope it's not just the whole angle of like, oh, anyone can be a Jedi, because that was really nice thematically for this movie, especially how it ties into the title of this movie. But I don't want to see a whole trilogy based on the stable boy at the end, like people are speculating on.
Yeah, I honestly don't think that's the case. Like I said, I don't think they're gonna make a whole episode or series about that one kid.
I really hope not, because I feel like that's the thing people are like, oh, that's what the new trilogy is gonna be. I'm like, yeah, not really. I feel like that's just kind of like a nice thematic bow at the end of this movie.
I thought it was like more symbolic of the Force in general.
Exactly. And it's also kind of like a frustrating, like, hey, all that casino stuff, you have to watch it because it ties in symbolically.
But as like I said, I do look forward to Rian Johnson's future trilogy whenever they decide to make that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not really looking forward to Han Solo, though. I'll admit that much. We'll see how that goes.
I mean, they haven't even released as much of a trailer yet.
I know. I'd be shocked if that movie, like, did that movie already get pushed up to December? Because if not, I'd be shocked if it kept its May release date.
No, it's still May.
How the hell is it still May? That makes no sense to me.
Apparently, they're making good progress with it. I have no idea.
Well, they're not making good progress with the marketing campaign.
I mean, it's Star Wars. It's gonna get seats. It could get butts in the seats no matter what.
I guess, but I have a feeling that's definitely going to be a case where, with Infinity War being released around the same time, and Infinity War is definitely going to be another movie where you and I are going to do the future of podcast about for sure. I'm sure we'll have a ton to say about that. But honestly, I'd be shocked if Infinity War didn't outgross Han Solo.
I mean, I honestly wouldn't be either. I mean, even Rogue One didn't. It only grossed more than $1 billion. I honestly hope that this movie does do well too. I mean, I might even hope it outgrosses episode 7.
I hope it outgrosses episode 7 too. I don't think it will, but you never know.
I mean, considering all the negative comments I keep seeing.
Yeah, but here's the thing though. I feel like this is a movie, it's a challenging movie, and for that reason I feel like it's going to be one of those things where, like, Jacob, have you seen The People versus George Lucas, the documentary?
No.
Okay, well, it's about the fan reaction to the prequel, specifically Phantom Menace, and there's this whole thing in that documentary where they talk about the reaction to Phantom Menace, where people were like, you know what, this is a Star Wars movie we need to see again. And I feel like, unlike the Phantom Menace, this is actually a legitimately great movie. And so, so it's going to be that way for a lot of people. I could see that. Like, me especially, like, I definitely know, like, I was planning on seeing this again. Like, I only saw Force Awakens once in theaters. I only felt the need to see Force Awakens once in theaters. But with this, if it being Rian Johnson, with the visuals and everything, and with the bold storytelling, hell yeah, I'm seeing it again.
I saw episode 7 twice, and I definitely will see this twice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I mean, I just like I said, I hope this movie does well. I mean, supposedly needs to make $800 million just to break even.
Oh, I think it's going to crush that. I mean, I think it's already made like 400 million worldwide in its first 3 days.
Like I said, I'm not really surprised. I mean, they have a lot of confidence in this movie, and I actually hope it gets a few Oscar nominations as well.
It'll never happen, but I honestly think you could nominate Mark Hamill.
Yeah, I mean, they've nominated people for stranger roles, so why not?
I mean, especially because this is going to be his last starring role as Luke Skywalker.
Well, I mean, we don't know how big he's going to be in episode 9, so...
we know he's not going to, like, as a Force ghost, just fundamentally, unless they really shift stuff around how the Force works, I feel like this is like his swan song. I mean, I'm sure we'll see him in episode 9, but we'll see him in episode 9 the same way we saw Obi-Wan in episode 5.
I said it'll just be surreal that pretty much all 3 of the main characters are no longer going to be in these movies.
And that's where the cool side of the pillow comes in. Did someone say original trilogy character? All right. Okay, Jacob. Well, I would say that's a podcast in the books. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about the future of this podcast because, like I said, this will be kind of breaking down all the major franchises. So, Jacob, I'm sure we'll do one for Black Panther coming up where, we'll talk about the fan reaction to Black Panther. We'll talk about sort of speculation about how Black Panther fits in going into Infinity War and all that stuff. It'll be a fun time.
And honestly, I look forward to the future of Star Wars in general.
So you like Star Wars?
Because basically this movie, as you keep saying, this movie opened up a lot of doors.
Oh yeah.
And I wouldn't.
I feel like Han Solo has a perfect quote to go out on to kind of sum up how a lot of people feel about this movie. All right, you ready for it? That's how I'll end things out.
Let's do it.
All right. That's not how the Force works.